Please subscribe to our channel, Pacific Front Untold, and be sure to leave a comment after watching a video. The Russo-Japanese War of 1904-1905 is remembered primarily for its contributing role in the fall of the Romanov dynasty. Lesser known are the war's consequences within the Japanese Empire. Having defeated the Russian Empire, which was considered a major European power, at the Battle of Tsushima and Port Arthur, the Japanese Empire seemed finally to have attained a respected position on the international stage. Yet the Treaty of Portsmouth, which ended the war, created widespread dissatisfaction among the Japanese populace. The negotiations were led by U.S. President Theodore Roosevelt in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, in September 1905. Despite an immensely costly war for both sides, Japan lacked the bargaining power to negotiate favorable terms for peace despite its victory. Concerned with maintaining the balance of economic and military power in the region, Roosevelt chose to preserve a degree of Russian power in northeast China. Furthermore, the Russians were adamant about maintaining their possession of Sakhalin Island, located north of Hokkaido, without paying any indemnity to Japan. With much reticence, Japan eventually agreed to give Russia the northern half of Sakhalin. The treaty also affirmed Japan's control of territory in Korea and southern Manchuria. And while it reduced Russia's influence over the region, the lack of any payment from Russia was considered a serious failure by the Japanese government, and perhaps more importantly, by its citizens. This eventually led to a massive protest, which turned into furious rioting that lasted from September 5th until September 7th, 1905. Outraged by what was perceived as a diplomatic snub, thousands of residents gathered in Tokyo's Hibiya Park to protest the treaty's terms. Angered by the police response, the fast-growing protest turned violent, and protesters marched through Tokyo, attacking buildings associated with Russia and the United States. During the three-day riot, almost three-quarters of the police boxes throughout the capital city were destroyed. Buildings and streetcars were torched, and some 450 policemen and 50 firemen were injured, in addition to many of the protesters, 17 of whom were killed. Ultimately, the government declared martial law to end the riots and restore order. The protest was the first major social uprising in Japan since the creation of the Meiji Constitution in 1890, which had started Japan's age of imperial democracy. It is seen as the first of many social upheavals in Japan throughout the first quarter of the 20th century, and significantly contributed to the collapse of the government of Prime Minister Katsura Taro. The riots also provided a lens for understanding the way Japanese relations with the U.S. and Russia developed during the 20th century. While relations with the U.S. only deteriorated after the Treaty of Portsmouth, Japan's relations with Russia improved somewhat in the following years. Most importantly, the Hibiya riots demonstrate the turbulence of early 20th century Japan and the growing dissatisfaction among the Japanese population with the imperial system of governance. Only 5 years later, perhaps as an indirect response to the turbulent riots and dissatisfaction with the Treaty of Portsmouth, Japan would move aggressively onto the Asian continent, annexing Korea and expanding its commercial and military activities in Manchuria.